Hi everyone. In this video we are going to discuss how to print the patterns in Java programming language. So what's a pattern? A pattern is a collection of repeated symbols or characters in a particular shape. That is called pattern. So if you see in this example, this is a pattern expected from our program. So 1 is printed 1 time and 2 is printed 2 times, 3 is printed 3 times, 4 is printed 4 times and 5 is printed 5 times. And every row is printed in new line. So this is what actually the expected pattern from our program. How to create this pattern in our program? So let us discuss. If you want to create such patterns, first you should create nested for loops. So what is a nested for loop? Nested for loop is a for loop within another for loop. So one for loop is defined within another for loop. That is called nested for loop. You can nest one for loop within another for loop, that for loop within another for loop, like that. The nesting levels can be infinity. That means there can be n number of levels of nesting can be there in a particular nested for loop. But for printing patterns, we are going to have only two levels nesting. That means you are going to have only two for loops nested one in another. So how we are going to use this nested for loop is actually the outer for loop decides the number of rows. For example, if you see in this pattern there are 5 rows, right? In this pattern we are having 5 rows. So the outer for loop is going to execute 5 times. That means to print 5 rows. Then the inner for loop is going to decide which is to be printed or what number is to be printed and how many number of times that number is to be printed in every row. So that is what actually the inner for loop denotes. So if you see this pattern, in every row, then the first row 1 is there 1 time, 2 is there 2 times, 3 is there 3 times, 4 is there 4 times, and 5 is there 5 times. Okay, so you have to go through a set of for loops or nested for loop, and the outer for loop is denoting the number of rows, and the value of the outer for loop's looping variable will be used to be printed in inner for loop and for a particular number of times. So we have to decide on that. Let us get into the program. For this I created a class patterns, and let me create a class pattern or patterns. Now in this we are creating the main method. So public static void main string args. Now as I said to you, the number of rows in the pattern is fixed, it's 5. Okay, so we are going to have a for loop that is going to execute 5 times. So in the Java programming language, the for loop is defined as a for keyword within set of parentheses, first a initial value for a looping variable. So let us declare a looping variable I, and its initial value should be 1 because the first value in the first row is actually 1 and last value in the last row is actually 5. So this outer for loop is denoting how many number of times this loop will execute, that how many number of rows are going to be there in this pattern, as well as the numbers that are going to be printed in this pattern. Both will be decided by this outer for loop. So it starts from 1 and is going till 5. So I is equal to 1 and I less than or equal to 5. And since we are getting the continuous numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it should print or should increment, right? It should increment, right? So the outer for loop is now actually denoting the number of rows and what is going to be there in every row, right? Now in this outer for loop, we are going to create the inner for loop. Inner for loop is actually deciding what is to be printed and how many number of times it will be printed. So that will be actually decided by inner for loop. So let us have a looping variable j, and if you are noticing the pattern, when for example, in the outer for loop, looping variable's value is 1, right? That means I is 1, right? It is printed one time. When I is 1, it's printed one time. When I is 2, it is printed two times. When I is 3, it is printed three times. When I is 4, it is printed four times. When I is 5, it is printed five times. That means when the I is printed I times in every row. You see, when I is 1, 1 is printed one time. Then when I use 2, 2 is printed 2 times. When I use 3, 3 is printed 3 times. When I use 4, 4 is printed 4 times. When I use 5, 5 is printed 5 times. So I is printed I times. I is printed I times. So what you want to do is the outer for loop denotes the number of rows and it starts from 1 and it is going till 5, and that value of I should be printed I times using the inner for loop. So how many times the inner for loop has to execute is I times, right? So the inner for loop's looping variable starts from 1 and is going till I, because it has to start from 1 and it has to go till I. That means it has to execute I times it will print the values, right? And j plus plus, right? Now the for loop is designed, right? What is to be printed? Whether the value of I or j. Again, you come to the pattern. You come to the pattern. When I use 1, 1 is printed one time. I use 2, 2 is printed two times. When I use 3, 3 is printed three times. So every time I is printed I times. So here what is to be printed is the value of I should be printed. How many times? I times. So the inner for loop is executing I times and every time it is printing I. So let us print I system dot out dot print ln. So if you are using print ln, everything will be going to the next line. So let us use print. So print will print a collection of elements of a particular row in the same line. Okay, in the same line, right? And every time you print the value of I. As we discussed, I is printed I times. So you print I and leave a space after every value. Leave a space after every value, right? Or otherwise you can use a tab space. You can use a tab space that will be creating even space among the letters or numbers, right? So now I is not declared, and j is also not declared, so let us declare them. So integer I comma j, right? Now let's compile and run the program. Yes, one more problem is there. What is that? Semicolon is missing, right? Yes. So now again compile. Now there is no syntax error. So we expect a particular pattern in our output screen. Let us check whether this program is working properly or not. You see what's happening? The value 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, then 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Right? So the numbers are printed properly, but it is not in the pyramid pattern. So everything is in the same row. But what is expected? One is there, one should be there in the first row, two should be there in the second row. That means for one iteration of the outer for loop, the inner for loop should execute a set of numbers with I number of times, and after printing I number of times the value of I, it has to come to the next line, but that is missing. That's why it is printing everything in the same line. And since we have provided, since we used print statement will print the content or string and it will keep the cursor in the same line, right? So what you want to do is the inner for loop denotes the values in a particular row or all the columns in a row. So in that case, after printing all the columns in the row, move the cursor to the next line by using the system.out.println blank one time, so that the cursor will move to the next line, right? Now we can compile it again and let us execute the program one time. See, Now 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Right? Let us clear the screen. Okay, and execute one more time for the clear output. You see, now the pattern is printed properly. Okay, so 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Right. Now, you see, if you want to have another pattern like this, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you want to get this pattern from this program, is it possible? Yes, it's possible, right? So if you notice in the execution of this for loops, nested for loops, when I is 1, j starts from 1 and is going till I, right? So that's how we wrote the for loop. The inner for loop is starting from 1 and is going till I. So when I is 1, j is taking the values till I. So when I is 1, it is taking till 1. So it's having only 1. Then when I is 2, j is starting from 1 and is going till I is 2. So 1 to 2. 1 and 2 will be there in j. Then when I is 3, j will be starting from 1 and is going till I. That means 3. Then when I is 4, j is starting from 1 and is going till 4. When I is 5, j is starting from 1 and is going till 5. See, now if you look at the values of j, you can see the pattern you expected, right? 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead of printing I, if you are printing j, then you will get this pattern. Let us check it. Instead of I, print j. And let us check it, right? Now let us compile it again and run the program again. See, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the second pattern is also obtained. So a small change in the logic of the program brings another pattern, right? So in this video, we discussed how to create simple Java program to print such patterns. I hope that you understood this video, and if you have any doubt, okay, let your doubt be raised in the comment section, and subscribe the channel Program for Programmers by Felix, and press the bell button for your further notifications, and happy learning, happy programming, and thank you.